I was 19 years old when my grandmother died. And the strange thing is, I felt it before anyone told me. At exactly 6:47 a.m., I woke up gasping, my chest tight like the mountain air she always talked about. The room was quiet, too quiet, the kind of silence that feels heavy instead of peaceful. My phone was face down on the nightstand. I didn't touch it, I already knew. She used to call me every Sunday at 7:12 p.m., never early, never late. Even when snowstorms cut off power in the mountains, she somehow found a way. That Sunday, my phone didn't ring. At 7:13, I flipped it over. 3 missed calls, 1 voicemail. I didn't play it. Some people say grief hits like a wave. For me, it was more like the ground disappearing under my feet, silently, without warning. I sat on the edge of my bed for a long time, staring at the cracked wall of my tiny apartment, remembering how she used to say, "Mountains don't move, sweetheart, people do." My grandmother lived alone in a mountain lodge no one in the family ever talked about. Whenever I asked why she never came down to visit, my father would change the subject. My mother would look away. And my grandmother, she would just smile softly and say, "Some places are safer from the truth." I didn't understand what she meant back then. 2 hours later, the call came. It wasn't from my father or my mother. It was from a number I didn't recognize. A man's voice, calm and professional, asked if I was sitting down. That's when I knew for sure. "She's gone," he said. "Your grandmother passed peacefully in her sleep." Peacefully. I hated that word. Funerals have a way of revealing who people really are. My family gathered like strangers, pretending to know each other. Dressed in black, eyes dry. My father didn't look at me once. He hadn't looked at me in over a year. Not since the night he told me to pack my things and leave. I was 18 then, too young to understand how easily love could be withdrawn. At the cemetery, as the wind whispered through the trees, I stood alone near the back. No one stood beside me. No comforting hand. No shared tears. Just me. And the memory of a woman who used to sneak me hot cocoa when my parents weren't looking. Who believed in me when no one else did. After the burial, most people left quickly. Some had places to be. Others had things to claim. I was about to leave too, when a man in a gray suit approached me. He introduced himself as my grandmother's attorney. He said my name carefully, like it mattered. "There will be a will reading," he said, "tomorrow morning." I almost laughed. I had nothing to inherit. Everyone knew that. My father made sure of it the day he disowned me. He told me I wasn't part of the family anymore, that whatever I did with my life from then on was my problem. So when the attorney hesitated before speaking again, I noticed. "There's something you should be aware of," he added. "Your grandmother left you her mountain lodge." I stared at him, waiting for the punchline. "That property," he continued, "is valued at approximately $1,360,000. The world tilted. My mind raced back to every family dinner where that lodge was never mentioned. Every argument that went quiet when I entered the room. Every time my grandmother hugged me a little tighter before I left. "She wanted you to have it," the attorney said softly. "Specifically you." That night, I didn't sleep. I kept replaying my grandmother's voice in my head, the way she used to say my name, like it was something precious. I wondered what my father would say when he found out. I wondered if my mother would finally look at me again. Most of all, I wondered why. Why me? Why the girl they pushed out? Why the mountain lodge no one talked about? By morning, one thing was clear. My grandmother didn't just leave me a property. She left me a truth, one that my family had spent years trying to bury. And tomorrow, when the will was read, nothing would stay buried. I didn't want to go to the will reading, not because I was scared of what I'd hear, but because I was scared of what I'd feel when I saw them again. The people who raised me, the people who abandoned me. The lawyer's office was in the city, all glass and steel, the exact opposite of my grandmother's world. As I stood outside the building, I caught my reflection in the door. I looked older than 19. Life had done that to me fast. Inside, they were already there. My father sat at the head of the table like he owned the room. He was dressed perfectly, suit pressed, posture straight, confidence intact. The same confidence he had the night he told me to leave. My mother sat beside him, hands folded, eyes down. She looked smaller than I remembered. Or maybe I was just seeing her clearly for the first time. My uncles, aunts, cousins, people who hadn't texted me once after I left home were all present, whispering, smiling. Then my father saw me. For a fraction of a second, something crossed his face. Surprise, maybe annoyance. But then he smiled. That smile, the same one he used in front of strangers. Polite, controlled, empty. "Well," he said, standing up slightly. "Look who decided to show up." No one offered me a seat, so I took one anyway. The lawyer entered moments later and began reading the will. Most of it was boring. Charitable donations, personal items, small sums of money. My family listened patiently, like predators waiting for the main course. My father leaned back, arms crossed, completely relaxed. He knew he was getting the lodge. Everyone thought he was. Then the lawyer cleared his throat. "At this point," he said, "we'll address the mountain property." The room shifted, bodies leaned forward, breath was held. My grandmother's mountain lodge. The lawyer continued, "including all land, structures, and assets associated with it, has been left in its entirety too." He said my name. Silence slammed into the room. My father laughed. A short laugh, confident, almost amused. "Very funny," he said. "You can stop the joke now." The lawyer didn't smile. "This is not a joke," he said calmly. "The property has been legally transferred to her." My father's smile didn't disappear right away. It cracked just a little, like ice under pressure. "That's not possible," he said. "She was disowned." The lawyer nodded. "I'm aware. Your mother was very specific." I felt every eye in the room turn toward me. Some with disbelief, some with anger, some with something much uglier. My father stood up fully now. "She manipulated her," he snapped. My mother was old, confused. The lawyer reached into his folder. "She anticipated that response," he said, "which is why she left documentation and a message." A message. My heart began to pound. The lawyer pressed play on a small recorder. My grandmother's voice filled the room, soft, steady, unmistakable. "If you're hearing this," she said, "then I'm gone. And if my family is angry, that tells me I made the right choice." My father went pale. "I did not leave the lodge to her by accident." My grandmother continued. "I left it to her because she is the only one who never tried to take something from me." My mother started crying silently. My father slammed his hand on the table. "This is ridiculous," he barked. "We'll contest it." The lawyer didn't even blink. "You can try," he said, "but you'll lose." That's when my father looked at me, not like a daughter, like an obstacle. As people stood up and voices rose, I realized something terrifying. This wasn't over. The lodge wasn't just worth money. It was worth war. And whatever my grandmother hid in that mountain lodge, it was powerful enough to make my own family turn against me without hesitation. When I left the building, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "Don't go to the lodge alone." My blood ran cold, because I hadn't told anyone yet, but I was already planning to go. I drove to the mountain lodge at dawn. I didn't tell my parents. I didn't tell the lawyer. I didn't even tell myself why I was in such a hurry. Only that staying in the city felt unsafe, like the walls were listening. The road climbed higher with every mile. Trees grew thicker. Cell service vanished. By the time the lodge appeared through the fog, my hands were shaking on the steering wheel. I had been there once as a child, or at least I thought I had. But standing there now, staring at the dark wood structure perched against the mountainside, I realized how wrong my memory was. This place didn't feel nostalgic. It felt watchful. The lodge was bigger than I expected. Not luxurious, not flashy, but solid. Like it had been built to last longer than people. Wind pushed against the windows, making a low, hollow sound, almost like breathing. The front door was unlocked. That should have comforted me. It didn't. Inside, the air smelled like pine and old paper. Everything was clean, too clean. No dust, no decay. As if my grandmother had known exactly when she would leave and prepared for it. My footsteps echoed through the empty space. On the main table, right in the center of the room, sat a single envelope. My name was written on it, in my grandmother's handwriting. I didn't open it right away. I walked through the lodge first. The kitchen was modest. The living room faced the mountains, a wide window revealing endless trees and cliffs. But what caught my attention was the locked door at the end of the hallway. I remembered that door. I was never allowed near it. No matter how much I begged, my grandmother would gently guide me away and say, "Some rooms are for later." Later had come. I returned to the table and opened the envelope. Inside was a letter. "If you are reading this, you made it here safely. That means they didn't stop you." My breath caught. There are things about our family you were never told. Not because you were too young, but because you were too honest. I sat down slowly. This lodge is not a gift. It is a responsibility. What's inside it will make sense only if you remember who turned their back on you. And why. I read the last line twice. "Do not trust your father." My chest tightened. I folded the letter and placed it back in the envelope. Then, with slow, deliberate steps, I walked toward the locked door. The key was already in the lock. Of course it was. The door opened into a small office. Shelves lined the walls, filled with old folders and boxes. On the desk sat a photograph turned face down. I flipped it over. It was my grandmother. But she wasn't alone. She stood beside a younger man, my father. They weren't smiling. They looked like enemies forced into the same frame. That's when I heard it. A sound upstairs. Footsteps. Not old, creaking ones. Fresh. Careful. Someone else was in the lodge with me. My phone buzzed in my pocket, startling me. Another message from the same unknown number. "Leave now. He's closer than you think." My heart began to race. I didn't scream. I didn't run. I stood completely still, listening. And that's when I realized the worst part. The footsteps weren't coming from the lodge. They were moving toward the locked office door. Toward me. I didn't move. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to run. But something heavier pinned my feet to the floor. The footsteps paused just outside the office door. Whoever it was knew exactly where I was. The handle turned slowly. I stepped back, heart pounding so loudly I was sure they could hear it. The door opened a few inches. "Hello," a man's voice called out. Not my father's. Not young, not old, controlled. "I know you're in there." I scanned the room desperately. No windows, no second exit, just shelves, papers, and my grandmother's desk. My eyes landed on the photograph still in my hand. "Relax," the voice said. "I'm not here to hurt you." I almost laughed at how calmly he said it. The door opened fully. The man stood tall, dressed in dark hiking clothes, his expression unreadable. He looked like someone who belonged in the mountains, not like a tourist. "Who are you?" I demanded, my voice shaking despite my effort. He glanced at the photograph. "So she finally told you," he said quietly. "Told me what?" "My name is Daniel," he continued. "I worked for your grandmother." Worked for her. I didn't lower my guard. "She asked me to watch the lodge," he said, "to make sure no one got here before you." Before me. My phone buzzed again. Same number. "That's him, trust him, for now." For now. Daniel stepped back, giving me space. "She knew they'd come," he said. "Your father especially." The way he said especially made my stomach twist. "What is this place?" I asked. "Why is my family so desperate to keep me away from it?" Daniel exhaled slowly. "Because this lodge isn't just property, it's proof." "Of what?" He walked to one of the shelves and pulled out a thick binder. "Of crimes," he said. "Financial, legal, ethical." I stared at him. My grandmother spent 20 years documenting everything. He continued. "Every illegal deal, every forged signature, every secret bank account." My legs felt weak. "She built this lodge as a shield," he said. "Remote, private, untouchable." I thought of my father's confident smile at the will reading. How quickly it cracked. "She knew you'd be the only one brave enough to finish what she started," Daniel added. I shook my head. "I don't want revenge." Daniel met my eyes. "This isn't about revenge, it's about survival." A sound cut through the air. An engine. A car pulling up outside. Daniel's face hardened. They're early. Who? I whispered, though I already knew. Your family, he said, and they didn't come to talk. My phone buzzed one last time. If they get the documents, you lose everything. Daniel grabbed a backpack from under the desk and shoved the binder inside. We have minutes, he said. You trust me. I looked at the lodge, the walls my grandmother built, the secrets she protected, the life she left me. I nodded. The front door slammed open downstairs. My father's voice echoed through the lodge. I know you're here, he shouted. Daniel tightened his grip on the bag. Then we don't have minutes anymore, he said. We had seconds. I had never seen my father run before. He burst into the lodge like a man, chasing something already slipping through his fingers. Two of my uncles followed him, their faces tight with panic and anger. They stopped short when they saw me. For a second, no one spoke. Then my father smiled. Not the polite smile from the lawyer's office. Not the fake one he used in public. This smile was sharp. There you are, he said. I was wondering how long it would take you to show up. Daniel stepped slightly in front of me. My father's eyes flicked to him. And you must be the caretaker. Something like that, Daniel replied calmly. My father ignored him and looked at me again. You shouldn't be here alone, he said. This place isn't safe. I almost laughed. You disown me, I said quietly. You don't get to worry about my safety. His jaw tightened. This doesn't have to be ugly, he said. Sign the property over. We'll give you money, enough to start over. There it was. Not an apology, not regret. A transaction. No, I said. My uncle stepped forward. You don't even know what you're holding. He snapped. That lodge is cursed. My grandmother's voice echoed in my mind. People lie best when they're afraid. I know exactly what I'm holding, I replied. The truth. That's when my father's patience broke. He grabbed a folder from his coat and threw it onto the table. Papers scattered. You think she was innocent, he shouted. You think your grandmother was some saint. Daniel stiffened. She forged documents. My father continued. She hid assets. She ruined lives. Daniel opened the backpack and pulled out the binder. She exposed criminals, Daniel said, including you. The room went silent. My father's face drained of color. I finally understood. The lodge wasn't just worth $1,360,000. It was worth prison sentences. That's when I remembered something the lawyer said. A clause. There was more to the will, I said slowly. Every head turned toward me. The final clause, I continued. You didn't hear it. My father's eyes narrowed. What clause? I took a breath. If anyone attempts to intimidate, threaten, or coerce the beneficiary, I said, they forfeit any remaining inheritance. My uncle swore under his breath. That includes you, I said to my father. For the first time in my life, he looked afraid. This ends now, he said quietly. He stepped toward me. Daniel moved instantly, blocking him. Outside, sirens wailed in the distance. My father froze. Daniel smiled slightly. She planned everything, he said. Even this. I looked at my father, really looked at him. He didn't look powerful anymore. He looked trapped. And I realized something in that moment. My grandmother didn't just leave me a lodge. She left me control. The sirens never came closer. They slowed, then faded into the distance, leaving behind a silence so heavy it felt deliberate. My father exhaled slowly, like a man who had just stepped back from a cliff. You called the police? He asked Daniel. Daniel shook his head. No. My father's eyes flicked to me. Then who did? I did, I said. The lie came out smoother than I expected. I watched my father's reaction carefully. He didn't relax. That told me everything. He believed they were coming, which meant he knew exactly what they would find. You have no idea what you're doing, he said, his voice lower now. Not angry, calculating. Those documents won't protect you. They'll destroy you. I thought of my grandmother, alone in this lodge for years, surrounded by secrets heavy enough to crush a family. They already destroyed someone, I said. Just not me. Daniel placed the binder back into the backpack and zipped it shut. We're leaving, he said quietly. My father laughed once. You won't make it down the mountain. The threat was soft. That scared me more than shouting ever could. We stepped outside into cold air that burned my lungs. My car sat near the edge of the drive, headlights off. Daniel moved fast, scanning the trees. "Did she ever tell you about the fire?" he asked suddenly. "What fire?" I replied. "Exactly," he said. As we drove away, the lodge grew smaller in the mirror. I expected relief. Instead, guilt settled in my chest like a stone. "She loved him once," I said. "My grandmother loved my father." Daniel nodded, and he used that. Halfway down the mountain, my phone rang. My mother. I almost didn't answer. "Please," she whispered as soon as I picked up. "You don't understand what you're doing." "I understand perfectly," I said. "You're breaking this family," she cried. "No," I replied. "I'm telling the truth about it." There was a long pause. Then she said something that made my hands tighten on the wheel. "She knew," my mother whispered. "Your grandmother knew what he was. And she stayed silent for years." "Why?" I asked. "To protect you," she said, "and to protect herself." The call ended. That night, we stopped at a motel far from the mountains. Daniel locked the door, closed the curtains, and finally opened the binder again. Names, dates, accounts, crimes. My father's name appeared again and again. "He's been laundering money for over a decade," Daniel said. "Shell companies, offshore accounts." My stomach turned. "Why didn't she expose him?" I asked. Daniel's expression softened. "Because the moment she did, he would have come for you." I didn't sleep. In the early hours of the morning, my phone buzzed with a news alert. "Local business leader under investigation for financial crimes." My father's face stared back at me from the screen. I expected satisfaction. All I felt was grief, because even monsters start somewhere. And somewhere, my grandmother had decided I deserved better than the truth too soon. I went back to the lodge alone, not because it was safe, but because some places don't let you move on until you face them properly. The investigation had bought me time. My father was under scrutiny. My uncle's silent. The family fractured beyond repair. Daniel wanted to come with me, but I refused. This part wasn't for witnesses. The mountain was quieter than before, like it was holding its breath. Inside the lodge, everything felt smaller now, less threatening, sadder. I went straight to the office. I noticed it immediately. The bookshelf behind the desk sat slightly off-center. I pressed against it, and the wood shifted. A narrow space opened behind the wall. Inside were letters, dozens of them, all addressed to me. My hands shook as I picked up the first one. "I wanted to give these to you in person, but courage comes late to some of us." I sat on the floor and kept reading. She wrote about the night my father disowned me, how she stood outside the house, listening, unable to intervene without exposing everything too soon. "I chose silence when I should have chosen you. I will carry that regret until my last breath." Tears blurred the words. She wrote about building the lodge, not as a retreat, but as a vault, about gathering evidence slowly, carefully, knowing that one mistake would cost more than money. "I stayed alive longer than I should have, because you needed time to grow." The last letter was different. Short. "I did not leave you the lodge because you were wronged. I left it to you because you are kind. And kindness, when protected, becomes strength." I pressed the paper to my chest. Outside, the wind howled through the trees. For the first time since her death, I cried, not quietly, not politely, but fully, openly, the way children cry when they lose something irreplaceable. I didn't know how long I sat there. When I finally stood, something inside me had shifted. This wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about finishing what she started, with mercy where she couldn't afford it, and strength where she no longer could. I locked the letters away. As I stepped onto the porch, the mountains stretched endlessly before me. The lodge wasn't a burden anymore. It was a promise. The trial didn't feel real while it was happening. I sat in the courtroom, listening to strangers describe my father as if he were already a ghost. Numbers were read aloud, transactions explained, years of lies laid out in neat, devastating order. He never looked at me, not once. When the verdict came, there was no gasp, no dramatic collapse, just the quiet sound of something ending. "Guilty." I expected relief. What I felt instead was a strange, hollow calm. After everything was over, I returned to the mountain lodge one last time. Not to hide, not to guard secrets, but to let go of them. I sold part of the land, not to developers, not to investors. I placed it into a trust. The money funded legal aid for families torn apart by crimes like my father's. The rest of the lodge I kept, not as a fortress, as a home. On the final evening before winter, I sat on the porch, wrapped in my grandmother's old blanket, watching the sun disappear behind the peaks. The air was sharp, clean, honest. I finally understood why she loved this place. Up here, lies couldn't echo forever. They had nowhere to hide. I whispered her name into the wind, not as a goodbye, but as a thank you. She didn't give me wealth. She gave me a choice. And for the first time in my life, I chose myself. The mountain stood still, and so did I.